Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are going to shortcut your learning curve on a really crucial piece of research, one that lays out a blueprint for a 100% clean energy future across Asia.
We've drilled down into one specific document for this. It's an academic article with the full title, Can Australia Power the Energy-Hungry Asia with Renewable Energy?
And it's a fascinating snapshot in time because it wasn't published yesterday.
No, it came out back in 2017, so you have to see it as a kind of historical foresight.
Right, an older paper, but its findings feel incredibly relevant to the debates we're having right now about infrastructure.
Exactly. It modeled a cost-optimal 100% renewable energy system for East Asia, but it was based on cost assumptions for the year 2030.
Okay, so it was a projection.
Right. The authors called it an overnight study, which
Yeah.
means the whole point was to investigate this case in principle. Could you technically and economically build a fully renewable system across this massive region?
And the big hook, the part that really caught my eye, is that it seems to prove one of the biggest clean energy dreams.
Well, it just failed the economic test.
It really does. It challenges that core idea of using Australia's amazing solar and wind to power the huge demand centers in North Asia. The results were not what many expected.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really get why it failed, you first need to understand the scale they were working with. This was huge.
This wasn't just looking at one country.
Not at all. They modeled all of East Asia, so Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. And they split that whole area into 20 distinct subregions.
20 regions. So you're talking from the Australian desert all the way up to industrial China,
Right.
all connected. That alone sounds incredibly complex.
It is. And the standard was really high. The model demanded a 100% renewable energy system,
Yeah.
not just on average, but operating reliably on an hourly basis for an entire year.
That hourly resolution is so important, right?
Mm.
It means the model has to deal with real-world problems like the sun setting or the wind dropping off everywhere at once. Exactly. If the model can't find a way to meet demand for even one single hour of the year, the whole scenario fails. It's a massive stress test.
So it's not just about generating enough power, but having it there when you need it.
Right. And to do that, they didn't just rely on solar panels and batteries. To give the system more flexibility and, manage the costs, they integrated flexible demand sectors.
That's sector coupling.
That's sector coupling. They basically made the demand side of the equation smart and adaptable.
So what were the key flexible demands they built into the model?
Two main ones: water desalination using seawater reverse osmosis, or SWRO, and industrial gas demand.
Okay, so think of it this way. If you have a ton of cheap solar power in the middle of the day,
Instead of just wasting it, the model can say, okay, let's use this cheap power to make fresh water or to manufacture synthetic natural gas.
which means you're storing that excess energy as a valuable commodity.
Precisely. And that dramatically lowers how much battery storage you need, which in turn lowers the whole system cost. They looked at 4 scenarios, and they all proved that connecting regions helps, but only up to a point.
And that point, that financial wall they hit, brings us right to the core
It
contradiction.
really does.
This is where the whole idea of the Asian supergrid, this huge network of power lines, it just didn't work in their 2030 model.
That's the one. The biggest negative finding was all about long-distance electricity transmission. The popularity has always been to build these massive high-voltage direct current, or HVDC, power lines.
To connect Australia's resources all the way up to China, Japan, ASEAN. It sounds so logical. You're linking the world's best solar resource with some of the world's biggest energy customers.
It does sound logical, but it failed on cost versus distance. The simulation found that the investment needed for that much cable for the installation, and especially for the big converter stations at each end,
It was just too expensive.
it was just too expensive. Once you're trying to send power over, say, 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers, the cost of that infrastructure just overwhelms the benefit of the cheap Australian solar.
So it's actually cheaper to build local storage.
Exactly. It becomes more cost-effective to use local solutions like batteries or even making your own synthetic gas inside those importing regions than it is to import raw electricity over those extreme distances.
So time flexibility, which is storage, beats location flexibility, which is transmission, when the distance gets too big.
That's a perfect way to put it. And it
Okay.
wasn't just an Australia problem, was it?
No, not at all. They found that even just connecting Southeast Asia with Northeast Asia via HVDC cables gave only a tiny financial benefit. We're talking a cost reduction of maybe 0.4% to
Oh,
0.7%.
barely worth doing.
The returns just diminish so quickly over those long distances.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so if Australia can't economically export electrons down a wire, is that it? Are its resources just stranded, or did the model find another way?
It found another way, and it's a brilliant pivot. The study tested an alternative that ended up giving the whole system its absolute lowest cost.
This is the RESNG trading scenario.
Precisely. Exporting a synthesized fuel instead of raw electricity.
So when you can't ship the electrons,
You ship the molecules. The long-distance shipping of renewable energy-based synthetic natural gas became the winning solution for certain parts of North Asia.
okay, let's break that down for the listener. How do you go from solar power to a fuel you can put on a tanker?
It's a technology called power to gas, or PTG. First, you use all that surplus renewable electricity to run an electrolyzer, which splits water into hydrogen.
Okay, so you have green hydrogen.
Then, through a process called methanation, you combine that hydrogen with captured CO2, and you create synthetic natural gas, SNG. From there, it's basically the existing LNG value chain.
You cool it down, liquefy it, put it on a ship.
And West Australia becomes this perfect liquefaction hub. It has so much low-cost solar and wind potential that it can actually afford the energy losses and the costs of that whole process and still be competitive.
But doesn't that whole chain, the liquefaction, the shipping, the regasification, doesn't that add a huge cost?
You'd think it would be prohibitive, but the study found it only added about 17% to the cost of the delivered gas.
Only 17%.
And that final cost was still much cheaper than if those Asian countries tried to produce that S&G themselves, where land is scarce and their solar resources just aren't as good.
So the quality of the resource in Australia just completely outweighs the cost of shipping it as a molecule. Who are the biggest takers in the model?
The biggest beneficiaries were East China and Japan. For them, imported RESNG replaced 65% and 74% of their industrial gas demand, respectively. It was a huge win for them.
Okay, but now for the nuance, because this is where you really see the system optimization at work. The model showed that South Korea did not import gas.
Right.
Even though importing it from Australia was technically cheaper than making it locally, why would the model do that?
And this is such a fascinating detail. It shows you how a system-wide optimization is different from just looking at what's best for one country.
Okay.
Korea had another option. Instead of importing expensive fuel molecules from Australia, it could import cheaper renewable electrons from its next-door neighbor, Northeast China.
Ah, so it used a shorter, more viable HVDC line from China.
Exactly. The system, looking for the lowest total cost for everyone, found it was cheaper to build that China to Korea power line and have Korea use that imported electricity to make its own local gas.
So shipping electrons over a shorter distance beats shipping molecules over a very long one.
Precisely. It shows the system will always find the path of least resistance, and that path doesn't always mean every single country gets the cheapest possible option for itself. It's about the cheapest option for the whole network.
But hold on, why would Korea ever agree to that? If there's a cheaper import option on the table, why would one country take a hit on its local cost just to lower the total bill for the whole region? That seems politically impossible.
And that is the billion-dollar question the study raises without really answering. The technical optimization works, the integrated system is cheaper overall. But to make it a reality, you need policies, you need agreements.
You need a way to share the savings.
You need a way to make sure the benefits are shared fairly so that countries like Korea are compensated for, not taking the individually cheapest route. That's the next huge puzzle for policymakers.
A puzzle for another day. Let's zoom back out. What was the final, absolute lowest cost this optimized system achieved?
The lowest total system cost, which was in that integrated RESNG trading scenario, came out to a levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE, of 52.50 euro per megawatt hour.
And what did the technology mix look like to get to that number?
It was overwhelmingly solar. PV technology was dominant, about 50% of all the installed renewable capacity, followed by wind at around 30%.
And for storage?
Batteries were king. They handled about 59% of the total storage throughput in the model. So you have PV and batteries handling that daily cycle.
And then things like wind and the SNG production handling the longer seasonal balancing.
That's the pattern. But the most powerful number for you, the listener, is the so what. The LCOE of this 100% RE system, somewhere between 52 and 61 euros per megawatt hour.
Was projected to be way cheaper than the alternative.
Dramatically cheaper. At the time, they were modeling alternatives in Europe, like nuclear power or gas plants with carbon capture and storage, CCS.
And those were coming in at what, over 100?
Around 112 euros per megawatt hour. So this study made a very clear economic argument that a 100% renewable system wasn't just possible, it was projected to be cheaper and far less financially risky.
So the takeaway is clear. Flexibility is everything, but you have to choose the right way to move the energy.
The study's biggest lesson is that the path to 100% renewables is basically free of unsolvable technical problems. But you have to use all the tools, short-distance grids, a ton of battery storage, and crucially, that sector coupling with synthetic fuels.
So to state the final conclusion one last time, the paper, Can Australia Power the Energy-Hungry Asia with Renewable Energy, effectively says yes. A 100% renewable system is stable, achievable, and cost-competitive in East Asia.
Yes. But the electrons have to be shipped as molecules over those very long distances.
Which brings us to our final thought.
This raises an important question. We've seen the study finds a 100% renewable system is more cost competitive than high-risk options like nuclear or CCS. And we've also seen the complexity with the Korea example where what's best for the whole region isn't what's cheapest for one country.
Right.
So what mechanisms, what treaties or financial agreements are actually needed to make sure those economic benefits are shared fairly among the exporters, like Australia, and the importers, like Japan and Korea?
That's the shift from a technical problem to a geopolitical one. A deep dive for another day. Thank you for joining us. So, what does this all mean? This knowledge is now yours.